was actually started 2 years ago. My name's Angie Covered. I'm the Fern Ridge School District Tag Coordinator. And when we began this project 2 years ago, our first idea was to make a local history book. And we have kids from elementary all the way through high school starting it. The kids have done all the work on this. They have spent hours researching. They spent hours at Applegate History Museum looking through books and looking at stuff and talking to people and making photocopies of pictures and finding out all the background information and then turning it into stories. They turned it into some historical fiction pieces, which is most of what we created today. And they took what they learned and they created characters to fit that time period and to match what was going on in our local history. They also have written some nonfiction articles to explain what was happening in just a factual way. The students edited the stories, they collected pictures for the stories. When we went to go make it a book, we realized that it would be a better performance. So it wasn't quite long enough and the pictures didn't quite work well enough for us to make a book. So we're performing here today. We're really excited. So these stories that they're reading were written 2 years ago. And then this year were edited to change them into a performance. Our youngest writer was a second grader when she wrote her story. And our oldest at that time was a senior, now she's coming back as a college student performing. So it's a big range of kids that have worked on this and they've really done all the work. Today your program says that there will be local history news articles read by Henry Bonini. He wasn't able to make it today, so Maddie Alansky jumped in today to read those parts for him. I want to thank a few people that really made this possible. Marty has donated her theater and all of her time to coaching us. She's not getting paid for this, and she has helped us tremendously figure this out. Jen Chambers and Jen Chambers and Pat Edwards helped at the beginning when we were writing a book, and they also helped coach the students as they rewrote their pieces into performance pieces. So thank you to them. And then we had some really great community support. The library board donated money towards this project. Megan Clark did some student interviews, and Ron Ormsby also did some student interviews. So kids were out there interviewing people, and so thank you to them. And then Fern Ridge School District, thank you for supporting the TAG program. They recently, a few years ago, started putting money again towards allowing me. I'm a second grade teacher, and I get out of my classroom one afternoon a week to work towards our TAG kids and our brightest kids in our district. And these kinds of projects wouldn't happen unless we had some of our school funds towards that so that I could do that. So thank you to the Fern Ridge School District for supporting our brightest kids and doing some TAG enrichment like this. And the last piece I just want to put in is the Applegate History Museum. They have given a lot of hours towards us. They're a fantastic resource, and they definitely need some more volunteers. Schools take field trips there. It's helpful for them just to have people that show up when a field trip comes, just to explain what's there to the kids and answer the kids' questions. So please, in your program is Violet's phone number, and please consider, and if you are a history person, please consider giving time and energy to them, because they are really valuable for our community. We want to keep it going. So I hope you enjoyed the show today. Thank you very much for coming.
Howdy.
In 1843, John Tyler was President of the United States.
Sojourner Truth left for New York to begin her career as an anti-slavery activist.
Charles Thurber patents a typewriter.
Charles Dickens publishes A Christmas Carol.
At the age of 24, Harriet Tubman was about to be married to John Tubman, a free African American who did not share her dream. Since she was a slave, she knew there could be a chance that she could be sold and her marriage would be split apart. Harriet dreamed of traveling north. There, she could be free and would not have to worry about having her marriage split up by the slave trade.
Although U.S. sovereignty over the Oregon Territory was not clearly established until 1846, American fur trappers and missionary groups have been living in the region for decades.
The first overland immigrants to Oregon, intending primarily to farm, came in 1841 when a small band of 70 pioneers left Independence, Missouri.
In 1842, a slightly larger group of 100 pioneers made the 2,000-mile journey to Oregon.
In 1843, some 1,000 men, women, and children climbed aboard their wagons and steered their horses west out of the small town of Elm Grove, Missouri. The train comprised more than 100 wagons and a herd of 5,000 oxen and cattle trailing behind. Dr. Elijah White, a Presbyterian missionary who had made the trip the year before, served as a guide.
Sunday week was a day terrible for its heat in Charleston, South Carolina, according to all its editors. But towards night, the oppressiveness of the weather was relieved by a thunderstorm, of which, and a ludicrous incident connected therewith, the Mercury gives the following account. The thunderstorm of Sunday night, the winding up of one of the most oppressive days ever inflicted on mortal man, was really terrific. The whole firmament growled thunder and shot lightning. It was blinding to look out, and at frequent intervals the thunderbolts burst overhead in a power that shook the solidest structures, then rolled with angry growlings along the wings of the storm. St. Paul's Church was struck, but not seriously injured. Beyond this, we have heard of no casualty, unless we may account as such the raining down of an alligator about 2 feet long, and at the corner of Wentworth and Anson Streets. We have not been lucky enough to find anyone who saw him come down, but the important fact is that he was there was uncontestable, and as he couldn't have got there any other way, it was decided unanimously that he rained down. Besides, the beast had a look of wonder and bewilderment about him that showed plainly enough he must have gone through a remarkable experience.
And I'm Annie. We are sisters, and our family, the Byerleys, traveled on the Oregon Trail from Delaware in the year 1843.
When we came to this area, I was 9, Chloe was 11, and our big brother Jonathan was 14.
Our mother's name is Jessica, and our father's is Colton.
It may seem like there wasn't much to do on the Oregon Trail, but we were able to ride horses, play games like chess and checkers, and help our mother cook.
Our father was a pelt trader. We had 2 meals and 1 horse. The horse's name was Lily, and we liked to ride her very much. Our wagon was a crowded place with 5 people, but we didn't mind.
Our father would often leave the wagon to go hunting, and we would miss him very much. But while he was gone, we would keep ourselves busy by gathering water from streams or lakes and sewing. And when he came back, he usually had meat to be cooked and a few coins for trading cloths.
One day, I overheard our parents talking. It was easy in such a small wagon. Our mother asked her father to buy some cloth for making clothes. I knew that our Aunt Betsy, Uncle Cliff, and our cousins Bill and Joey would be coming to stay with us soon. Still, we had plenty of cloth. I didn't understand why we would need more.
When Chloe told me what she heard, I got pretty suspicious, especially when I saw that her mother had used the cloth to make clothes for a baby. Even Billy and Joey are older than that.
Soon I started talking to our father about my friend Alexa, whose family was also moving to Oregon. I said that when they settled in, I wanted to go to school with Alexa at Central School. It was one of the first schools built in Oregon. This school right here.
The nights were starting to get colder, and Dad couldn't go out as often. We didn't have as much money. But then Aunt Betsy and Uncle Cliff came to stay with us. Our Uncle Cliff was a blacksmith, and he was able to make a little bit of money.
Annie and I were both very interested in our uncle's work, although his tools took up a lot of space. We would often watch Uncle Cliff make axe heads and knives. They were some of the things that he made most often. One time, after a pocket knife that he made had cooled for about an hour, Uncle Cliff let us carve with it.
One day, our parents brought everyone together. It turns out our mom had a big surprise in store for us. I have something I need to tell you. I'm gonna have a baby, she said. We were very surprised. Jonathan stood there, his mouth open, dumbstruck.
A baby, I said. How wonderful. What will we name it?
Mom didn't know what the baby's name would be, but she said in a whisper that she hoped it would be a girl.
Our cousins then screamed, I heard that, in unison, and went into an argument about who said it first.
After what seemed like forever, the weather started to warm up and our dad could go outside again. I was very excited for spring. We had been traveling for 4 months. I didn't know it would take that long to get to Oregon.
We couldn't wait for the baby to come. Our mom decided to name the baby Katie if it was a girl and Brian if it was a boy.
Soon, Mom wanted to start a small inside garden. Our dad and uncle used some of the money they made to get some seeds, pots, and soil. We put the pots in pockets sewn onto the inside of the canvas used to cover our wagon.
We were very excited to help Mom with the garden. We planted cherry tomatoes, spinach, strawberries, basil, and small onions.
We took turns watering the plants every day, and soon little sprouts started to pop up.
Before we knew it, it was the beginning of April. All of the things that we planted earlier in the spring grew quite nicely, though they didn't get very big. Then Jonathan, our big brother, started going out to hunt with Dad. He said that he wanted to be a pelt trader too.
We couldn't believe it. Summer was just around the corner. It was almost May, my favorite month. My birthday was May 11th, and soon I would turn 10.
Now that it was getting warmer, we could ride Lily more often. I was excited about that. We hadn't ridden Lily in a long time.
One day, I went to water the plants and saw that we had strawberries that were ready to be picked. Mom, Chloe, I called, come look at this.
Mom and I came over to see what was going on, and we were very excited to pick the strawberries.
Once we were done picking, everyone gathered around and we divided the strawberries amongst ourselves. Each person only got a small taste, but that was okay.
On Annie's birthday, our dad said she should go hunting with him. While she was gone, the rest of us were getting ready for a surprise birthday party. It was very exciting.
When I got back to the wagon, everyone surprised me with my favorite dessert, strawberry shortcake. My mom had saved some of the strawberries for the party. We didn't know where they went, but we thought that Billy and Joe ate them. I didn't get many presents, but that was okay.
Our mom gave her a cookbook. Our brother and dad gave her a new pink dress, and her cousins and aunt and uncle gave her a carved pocket knife.
I loved the presents and the strawberry shortcake very much, and I went to bed feeling like I had the best birthday ever.
Spring was very busy for both of us, with the boys rushing around, carving lessons with Uncle Cliff, and helping Mom in the kitchen and the indoor garden, not to mention setting up camp every night in a wagon circle and packing it all up in the evening.
Would you look at that, I thought one warm afternoon. It's already the beginning of summer. If spring was busy, I didn't know what summer was going to be like.
Jonathan went hunting every day, and I asked about going to school with Alexa every chance I got, although I tried not to pester too much.
Although it was busy, summer went by very quickly, and before we knew it, we were almost to Oregon. I was so excited that I almost stayed up all night for 3 days.
After a couple more weeks, we arrived in Oregon, and just in time, too. Our mother was almost ready to give birth. Everyone was working day and night to build shelter.
Chloe and I couldn't do much to help our dad, but we tried to do everything we could. After we had a small shelter built, our dad started talking to our mom about building a bigger house once winter was over.
One chilly afternoon in fall, I heard Mom screeching. I called Anya over, and we ran and found her sitting in the shelter with a doctor giving her some medicine, and in her arms was a baby girl. We were delighted.
The winter was very long and dull for us, and food and money were scarce. But as she grew older, our sister Katie was quite entertaining. She made funny sounds and did silly things. It also felt good to help our mom by taking care of her.
With spring approaching, Dad cut down trees with some of the other men and stacked them once the firewood was chopped.
I wanted to know why, so one day when he came in, I asked him about it. He said that we would use the wood to build our house in the spring.
Finally, after a long and hard winter, the spring came, and the men were ready to start building the house. Uncle Cliff made nails, and Annie and I started to carve wooden pegs that Dad said might be useful for building.
The men used a big two-man saw to cut trees. It was a tiring job for them, so I kept myself busy by bringing them fresh lemonade Chloe and I made from lemons Mom bought from the market and preserved in the cold cellar that she and Aunt Betsy had been working on.
Everybody was working like crazy. Lots of other people were working everywhere, so Annie and I decided to make a lemonade stand. We put the lemonade stand near an area where lots of people were cutting trees, but made sure to put it a safe distance away. On the stand, we put a sign that said, "Fresh lemonade, 1 cent per cup." It was very hot as summer arose again. But we enjoyed being able to experience the great outdoors. But with fun came responsibility. When we weren't managing our lemonade stand, we were watching the younger kids preparing food and making clothes, among lots of other jobs.
Gradually, the house became bigger. After they finished the walls, doors, and windows, they used narrow timber tiles split from blocks called shakes for the roof of the house. I was so excited when we could move in that I almost screamed.
As it turned to summer, we started another garden. In the fall, after we moved into the house, we both got to carve a pumpkin.
Like Chloe suggested, we went to Central School. I liked it very much and made many friends. Although being on the Oregon Trail was not always easy, it was for the best, and we were really glad that we came to live here in Oregon.
In the presidential election of 1912, Democratic challenger Woodrow Wilson wins in a landslide victory over Republican William Howard Taft.
In 1912, women were allowed to vote in 6 states. The first time all presidential candidates treated women as important to victory. It would be another 8 years before the 19th Amendment gave all women in the United States the right to vote.
The Titanic tragically sinks on April 15th.
The nation loves baseball. Fenway Park opens in Boston. The Boston Red Sox, assisted by a famous error, defeat the New York Giants in extra innings to win the 1912 World Series, and in what is considered to be one of the greatest games of baseball ever played.
The Girl Scouts of the United States of America is founded.
Average yearly income is $1,033. A gallon of gas is 7 cents. A loaf of bread is 5 cents. A medium-priced home was $2,750, and a postage stamp cost 2 cents.
The first zippers were being introduced and used on clothing.
The Ford Model T was being mass-produced in the U.S.
Zeppelins were seen as the future of air travel, but airplanes were becoming more common.
Friday, February 25th. The Big Moose excursion and dance is reported to have been a very pleasant affair. The train arrived from Eugene at 8:30, bringing about 100 merry fun lovers. They readily joined in with the local dancers, and a fine time was enjoyed until late, or rather early, hour, when they returned to their homes, declaring the trip to Veneta was a pleasant one. This was the first excursion party to visit us, but it is not probable that it will be the last.
June 16th, 1912. We had lived in California all my 13 years, but now Pa and Ma yearned for more land for our large family we grew up in. We searched for weeks, but no larger plots were available here. A glimmer of hope came when a friend told us that many people were able to get plots of land up in Oregon. It was a gamble, but Pa sold our house, furniture, and animals to buy all 8 of us train tickets to Eugene, Oregon. The train trip was short, only a day, but because of the anticipation in my stomach, it felt much longer. Soon, the conductor came out and informed us that we would be arriving in Eugene in 5 minutes. We stayed in a small hotel for about a week, seeking out our new home. We were very disappointed, for Eugene was not what we were looking for. It was more crowded than we wanted. Then we heard about a small town called Veneta. It sounded exactly like what we were looking for. so we took another chance and headed out. That afternoon, we arrived at Veneta. It was a small mill town with a neighboring town called Elmira. Because of its small size, it didn't take very long to find Main Street. It had a surprising amount of stores. There was the Grand Era Hotel, the Picket Livery, the first store in Veneta, a blacksmith shop, and a J.P. Doodle store. We camped our first night in Veneta, but the next day, Pa met a man who was selling half of his land. He offered to sell it to Pa for half price because it had been on the market so long. Pa bought it right up with the money from selling our house. We had to build a temporary shelter while we began construction of our house. Thankfully, Veneta had warm summer nights that were pleasant and comfortable to sleep in. Just as the leaves began to change color and a light chill set in, Pa finished our new home. September 1st, 1912. With the house now finished and the last remaining money from Pa selling our stuff running low, Pa had to find work. He searched vigorously and went to as many interviews as were available, but had no luck. Then, just as we were about to lose hope, he got a job at the Longdale Mill. Pa bought us fresh veggies, meat, and bread from town that night to celebrate his new job. Even though the meal was the best we'd had in a long time, bad news popped up. Children, in 3 days you'll begin school at Elmira Grade School, Ma announced. September 4th, 1912. Those 3 days flew by fast, and before I knew it, I was standing in a small schoolhouse. I gulped and looked around at the faded blue painted walls and the wood flooring. I attentively walked over and slid into a small desk. "Good morning, class," Mrs. Smith said. I relaxed into my seat. Her voice was sweet and kind. Maybe 8th grade wouldn't be so bad. January 30th, 1913. In January, I came home from school and saw a troubling sight. Pa was pacing back and forth with his paycheck in hand. "What's wrong?" I asked, worried. "It's nothing to worry about, honey," Pa said, patting my head. That night, I eavesdropped on my parents and discovered that Pa's worries sprouted from the amount on his paycheck. It wasn't enough. He told me not to worry, but I worried all the way to school the next day. The only thing that snapped me out of my state was Mrs. Smith's announcement that she was moving. Her husband had gotten a job promotion in another state. A light bulb went off in my head. Ma had been a teacher down in California. I couldn't wait to run home and tell them the good news. As soon as the bell rang ending the day, I ran home. "Ma, you were a teacher for a while in California, right?" She nodded. "Well, Mrs. Smith is moving, so there's a job opening if you wanted to work again." "I would love that," she smiled. Ma got the job right away, adding $35 to her monthly paycheck. February 23rd, 1913. At the end of the month, worry set over all of us. Even with Ma's new job, it still didn't cover the cost of feeding 6 children. At dinner that night, everyone was quiet, until my 12-year-old brother, Anthony, spoke up. "I can take a job at the mill." "No," Pa answered firmly. "Charles," Ma piped in after a moment, "what else are we going to do?" "Evelyn, you can't possibly agree to this," Pa said, turning his anger towards Ma. "He's 12. "We have to eat," Anthony said with a surge of bravery. Pa stayed silent, then simply nodded his head. Anthony dropped out of school on Monday and immediately began to work at the same mill as Pa. He would be working the same hours as Pa, which were 9 to 5, bringing home 50 cents a day, just enough to make ends meet. Part of me wished that I could be working instead of him. I hated standing by while my baby brother had to take on the role of grown-up. Now, with Anthony working, we all had to pick up the slack. I had to do laundry along with my other chores. I hated cleaning the laundry. Having to boil clothes and then cranking them through the machine, it was simply exhausting, not to mention finding a good place to hang them out to dry. Although I reminded myself, doing laundry was a small price to pay for food on the table. May 4th, 1913. My heart pumped in excitement as we bumped down the road. This was our first family hunting trip in Veneta. The hunting trips were always fun down in California. Being out in the woods for 3 days with your family, hunting, camping out under the stars, cooking food over the fire, then sitting and singing songs and telling stories. The days after the trip were bittersweet. We longed to be back in the woods, feeling content and carefree. However, we had an abundance of meat and a few new fur coats. Though this year was harder to leave than any other year, for Oregon's forests are some of the most beautiful. May 14th, 1913. A week after our hunting trip, we were off to another first since moving to Veneta, our yearly trip to the big city. Here in Oregon, that meant Eugene. As a special treat this year, my brother Anthony was going to buy us dinner at the Greasy Elbow. It was going to cost him about 2 days' wages, but he insisted. We journeyed out to Eugene on this bright and crisp May day. We bought everything from new dishes to school supplies for next year. Then, after a long day of shopping, we were all exhausted. We headed out to dinner to regain our energy for the trip home. I sat up straight at the Greasy Elbow, trying to look proper. We didn't get to eat out very often. The whole experience was wonderfully full. My heart fluttered and my stomach growled every time the waiter walked by with a tray of food. Finally, our meals came. I tried to eat slowly to savor it, but I was so hungry I ended up finishing first. I was full, but I wanted this moment to last, so I had dessert anyways. Once I was finished, I was certain I wouldn't eat again for the rest of the month. Finally, we all finished our food, and by the grunts my family let out when they got up, they were just as full as I was. My brother got lots of hugs that night. June 16th, 1913. A smile spread over my face when I realized what day it was. It was the 1-year anniversary of the day we moved to Veneta. The year had gone by fast, but it felt like we'd been here forever. It felt like this is where we were always supposed to be. And most of all, it felt like home. In 1940, with the rearming of the U.S. forces, the Great Depression was finally beginning to ease, and Americans were earning more and buying more, so being able to buy goods was further fueling the economy.
In the U.S., the feel-good feeling of leaving the Depression behind fueled the making of some great movies, including Gone with the Wind and The Great Dictator.
Jazz sounds were the popular music of the day, from the likes of Benny Goodman and Count Basie, amongst others.
The nylon stockings invented the previous year were all the rage with women.
FDR was elected for a third term, but Americans were starting to believe they should help Britain in its fight for survival in Germany, and the first peacetime draft occurred in September 1940, which had ominous overtones for the future. Britain was being bombed incessantly, and many believed it may only be time before America would be involved.
The first issue of the Captain America comic book is released for sale.
There was the first appearance of 1940's most popular Christmas gifts, toys and presents. Red Ryder carbine action 200-shot range model BB rifle with a compass in the stock.
TV was demonstrated at New York's World's Fair. There were less than 7,000 privately owned televisions in the U.S.
The USA entered World War II at the end of 1941 after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and Roosevelt took a stand as a strong leader when the U.S. joined the Allies in Europe.
Fern Ridge Reservoir is a place where families spend sunny summer days swimming, riding boats, and enjoying the outdoors. But many people don't know about the history it holds for the families that lived on the property decades ago. Before the Army Corps of Engineers bought the land, many farmers farmed the land that is now the dam and reservoir with their families. Unfortunately, this land was known for extreme flooding caused by the Willamette River. The flooding was common and created several problems for the homes and crops. The Corps of Engineers believed if they created a dam, it would help control the flooding, but it also meant that the families and farmers living on this land would be forced to move. And that is exactly what the Corps did. They offered as low as $20 per acre to families, while others were offered $80 per acre. The Corps had a trick up their sleeve, though. They claimed that this was a government project, and if the landowners refused, they would be forced to go to court. When all the land was bought, construction began. It was the year 1940. A large crew was required to use hand tools and heavy equipment. The dam was built in less than 2 years, ending on December 3rd, 1941. The total cost was $11,672,000 to build it. Today, the lake contains 10,400 acres of water. The dam alone stands 46 feet tall and has prevented 101,284,000 in flood damages. The lake also is home to five parks: Perkins Peninsula, Kirk Park, Richardson, Zumwalt, and Orchard Point. At the time it was being built, many believed it would only destroy the lake, but it is now a landmark for the people around this area.
Wake up, my little sister Elizabeth pounced on me in the early morning. Not now, I groaned as the bedroom light flickered on. It's a shopping day, Elizabeth exclaimed. I don't enjoy shopping, I sighed. Well, I do, and Mama said we can't argue, Elizabeth said while rolling her eyes. Hurry up. After a few mumbled words, I found myself in the kitchen surrounded by my family. Eat up, Mama said, handing me a plate of bacon and eggs in my hands. We need to be leaving soon. This is amazing, Elizabeth exclaimed, happily munching away. Oh, Daddy, I really want a new dress today. I'd be delighted to fulfill my daughter's requests. And what about you, Charlotte? He asked, glancing in my direction. I don't need anything, I bluntly said. In reality, I had no desire to spend my day shopping. Charlotte Grace, my mother said, staring my way and using my middle name. You're going to need some new things for the What for? I questioned. Nothing, sweets, Daddy replied, giving our mother a long, hard scowl. Mom is a little sleepy today. Do I have to come too? My older brother Thomas asked as he made an appearance. Dirt covered the front of his clothes, but he didn't seem to mind one bit. No, son, Daddy murmured. Me and you need to have a talk before we leave. Yes, sir, he replied politely. Girls, Mother spoke, you need to pack an overnight bag. Daddy and I are afraid we won't be able to make it home in time. Where are we staying? Elizabeth glanced up excitedly. The Eugene Hotel, Daddy simply replied. Really? I then asked, excited to hear this news. We never stay there. I'm making an exception for my wonderful daughters, Daddy said with a smile. Thank you, Elizabeth cried out while giving Daddy a big hug. You're the best. After finishing our meals, Elizabeth and I headed up to our shared room, searching for everything we would need for shopping and spending the night at the hotel. After a loud knocking on our doors, Mother asked, Ready, girls? We are, I replied for both of us. I didn't look much like my mother or even my father. They both had dirty blonde hair while I had brown hair. Thomas and Elizabeth both received their parents' genetics. Two nearly looked like twins, besides the age difference, with their curly blonde hair. The one thing that made it possible for me to be related to my family were the big blue eyes everybody seemed to have. Girls, please we'll get into our car, Daddy said. Both Elizabeth and I lugged our bags behind us as we got into our brand new car. Everyone at school thought it was the coolest we had the latest car on the market. And off we were, on our way to spend a day in the most terrible way possible, shopping. After a long day of shopping the day before and spending the night at the Eugene Hotel, we finally returned home. Charlotte and Elizabeth, I need to talk to you girls, Daddy said shortly after arriving home. The first thing I noticed once we entered the house was the emptiness. Only a few pieces of stray furniture lined the floor. Nothing was there anymore. Daddy, Elizabeth cried. Where is everything? About that, he grumbled. We lost our house. We what? I questioned. We weren't poor and always had a little bit of extra money. Mama, explain this, please. Calm down, sweetie. Everything and everyone will be fine, she reassured. Our land was taken from us. There wasn't much we could do. Trust me, we tried. It won't be that bad, though. We'll live with Nana and Papa. That will be fun for you two, I'm sure. What about our friends? Elizabeth cried out, referring to our neighborhood. They have to leave too, Daddy interrupted. We need to be leaving soon, so hurry up and see if everything in your room has been packed. Why do we have to pack away all of our things? Elizabeth questioned as we headed up to our room. Mama already explained. We're moving to Nana and Papa's, I told Elizabeth. Charlotte, I don't want to leave our house, Elizabeth whispered. Neither do I responded, wiping a tear from my cheek. Together we stood looking in our room, only to find everything stacked in boxes. This is silly, my little sister shrieked from my side. With sudden rage and anger, she kicked the wall with a loud thud. Elizabeth, calm down, I whispered. No, she cried. Everything I've ever known in my entire life is going to be gone. Without waiting for my reply, she stormed out of the doorframe and out of the front of the house. Slowly, everything was brought to Nana and Papa's. With our last load of stuff, we stood hand in hand, looking at the big white house in front of us, that I had called mine since I was born. As a family, we stood with our tear-stained cheeks, getting our last few glances of the house. "Excuse me, sir," a big man spoke while signaling my father. "We are ready." Without another word, the man motioned for the big cranes to pull forward. I could hear the rumbling long before I could see them, but sure enough, they were there. "I can't watch," I squeaked. "Let's go," Mama said, grabbing Elizabeth and I's hands. "Mama," I began asking, "what are the big men doing?" "You mean the Corps of Engineers? They're going to destroy the house and many other homes around us to build a lake and a dam," our mother replied like this wasn't a huge loss for our family. "This isn't fair," Elizabeth complained. "But why?" I questioned. "The reasoning for a lake and a dam here? You know the flooding that happens every winter? Well, if they build the dam here, it will save money and damage from the flooding," Mama replied. Quickly, I whispered, "I suppose that's good." "It is very good, dear. And just think, we'll get to spend more time with Nana and Papa," she said, pointing out the positive in a dark situation. "Can we say bye to the neighbors?" Elizabeth asked. "They already left. They're the last of the neighborhood to leave," Mama said. "They need to say goodbye to us," I mumbled. "Charlotte, everyone is just as upset as we are. They probably wanted their space," she reassured me. Nana and Papa didn't live far, but I found myself silently sobbing in the back of the seat of the car the entire drive there. I noticed Elizabeth slightly crying too. Trying to be a good sister, I reached over and grabbed her hand, mustering up a weak smile. Waiting on the front porch were Nana and Papa too. They had weak smiles also. "Hi there, kids," Nana shouted. "How are my granddaughters?" "I'm okay, Nana," I replied. "Do you think some cookies will make you and Elizabeth feel better?" she asked with a smile. At the words of cookies, Elizabeth's ears perked up. "Cookies make everything better. Girls, let's get inside and work on those cookies. I think Papa and your parents are going to talk a little outside for a while," Nana explained to us as we entered the house. This wouldn't be Nana and Papa's house anymore. It was our home. 1944. 4 years. 4 years after everything. After losing our house, after moving with Nana and Papa. So much can happen in 4 years. When I first found out about the dam, I was upset to say the least. Now looking back on it, it wasn't that bad. Sure, we lost our house, but we were now closer to my grandparents than ever before. If the dam was never built, I would have never learned how to take care of the animals or learn how to garden. I've grown up quite a bit. I've learned to forgive people. Life was easier lived if I didn't carry a heavy weight of hate on my shoulders every day. There's something so refreshing knowing my family has finally forgiven everyone.
Johnson was President of the United States.
Wages were not more than $2 an hour for most. You could have a hamburger, fries, and drink for less than $1. Gas was around 25 to 35 cents a gallon. Professionals earned as much as $500 a week. The Beatles' first LP cost $3.50 at Kmart, which had just started in non-stereo. In stereo, it cost $4.50. That was a lot of money. Average annual income was $13,000.
The first U.S. combat troops arrived in Vietnam as 3,500 Marines landed at China Beach to defend the American air base at Da Nang. They joined 23,000 American military advisors already in Vietnam. The arrival of combat troops is considered by some the start of the war, although American military advisors had been in Vietnam for over 10 years.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed last year, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was just passed. Desegregation of schools was slowly happening. Brown versus Board of Education had happened years ago. The schools were not enforced yet. MLK Jr. led a march from Selma to Montgomery, and the KKK was strong and active.
Peter Jennings, age 26, became the anchor of ABC's Nightly News.
The Sound of Music is released.
The hills are alive with the sound of music.
Peace signs, bell bottoms, and skateboards were popular.
Going steady was shown by the girl wearing the guy's ring or something he gave her around her neck on a chain. In high school, usually the girl had a guy's jacket or something.
Most homes only had black and white TV because most TV shows were made in that mode. However, starting in this year, many more shows were in color and began the demand for color TV. This transition to color broadcasting was completed by 1967, when nearly all shows were now in color and many more homes now owned a color TV, which cost $500 more.
Anyone who liked Elvis was old. Elvis by this time had become the Frank Sinatra of rock, meaning he was old school. Greasy hair slicked back, silly rock songs that appealed only to those 20 years older. He was a crooner.
Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas!
Tweeners and teenagers rocked to these bands. The Beatles,
Help, I need somebody. Help, not just anybody. I forget the rest of the words to that song.
the Rolling Stones,
I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get no satisfaction.
and the Supremes.
I'm not doing that one.
In 1962, Veneta became incorporated as an official city in Lane County. For over a decade, it had been a listed town because of the presence of a local post office, and for even longer, an area of dwelling for many people. However, being a city would only bring on many changes. Veneta would now have a mayor and a city council, making our city traditions like the Light Parade and the Harvest Festival possible. It would also allow Veneta to have sheriff service and a city water system that towns such as Elmira do not have. It took 2 votes for Veneta to become a city because the first vote was a tie. Since its incorporation, Veneta has expanded its population, business presence, and recreational areas along with its traditions.
Want gravy with those biscuits, honey? Big's Cafe was anything but a peaceful little restaurant. Ron Ormsby bought the Omni-Thai Cafe in 1965 and changed the name to Big's Cafe. Ron employed high schoolers as cooks and waitresses like me. He sold huge hamburgers and homemade milkshakes, both favorites of local loggers and truckers. Ice cream cones were a big success because at the time, Big's was the only place in town selling ice cream in the summer. Sunday mornings were also very busy for us waitresses. We'd serve up to 30 gallons of delicious gravy on fresh biscuits. This was also a place where people met and did business while they ate. Ron hung up his apron in 2001 and the cafe eventually went out of business. But even to this day, people remember the large portions, the friendly service, and the tasty food. Big's was more than just a cafe. It was a community landmark. I'll be right out with your order, honey.
Howdy.
Howdy.
In 1972, Richard Nixon was elected to his second term of presidency. He had widespread popularity.
5 White House operatives are arrested for burglarizing the offices of Democratic National Committee, the start of the Watergate scandal.
Neil Armstrong walked on the moon 3 years earlier.
Title IX of the Educational Amendments is enacted by Congress and is signed into law by Richard Nixon. Title IX prohibits sex discrimination in an educational program or activity receiving any type of federal financial aid. As a result of Title IX, any school that receives any federal money from elementary to university level, in short, nearly all schools, must provide fair and equal treatment of the sexes in all areas, including athletics.
Fashions of 1972 included bell-bottoms, cheesecloth shirts, and platform shoes, while women had a choice of midi, or maxi skirts.
Grease had its first Broadway run.
HBO launched by Time Warner.
Pong became the first commercially successful video game.
The digital watch made its debut.
The Volkswagen Beetle became the world's biggest selling car.
Led Zeppelin released Stairway to Heaven.
The average cost of the new house was $27,550. Average income per year was $11,800. The average monthly rent was $165, and the cost of a gallon of gas was 55 cents.
What has now become the Oregon Country Fair began in Eugene in early November of 1969. It began as a craft sale to benefit a local alternative school, the Children's Community School. The following year, it was held in Elmira on the property it now owns. In the summers of 1972 and 1982, concerts featuring the Grateful Dead would head on the grounds as a benefit for the Springfield Creamery. A documentary called Sunshine Daydream was made about the 1972 Grateful Dead show at the fair. What began as a small Renaissance fair has grown into an enormous, famous event drawing crowds of 45,000 from all over the country, largely due to generous workers and volunteers who donate their time, money, and energy to make up the fair a success for everyone. Decades later, the fair has become an integral part of the Fern Ridge community year-round. The fair gives generously to local schools and supports the arts throughout the district as it undergoes budget cuts. The organization also gives back to the community through the Bill Wooten Endowment Fund, the Jill Hyman Vision Fund, the Board of Directors donation grants. Each fall, the home cross-country meet for Elmira High School is held on the grounds of the country fair, making a unique course for a race that has grown to be one of the largest high school races in the state. It also hosts a week-long culture jam for every youth, featuring workshops and lessons to encourage and nurture creativity through the arts.
I graduated from high school in the summer of 1972, and I took a bus from my hometown of Seattle down to Eugene to visit my older sister for the summer, who was studying at the University of Oregon. Although we had been close growing up, Sarah only came home for the holidays, and I didn't see much of her anymore. Our mother suggested I spend the summer with her before I moved to Philadelphia for college in the fall. I took a cab to Sarah's address, an enormous yellow house on top of a hill near the campus. I checked the address again to make sure I wasn't mistaken. It was almost twice the size as my house in Washington. The front lawn was unkempt and littered with weeds and untamed rose bushes. A half dozen bikes were leaned up against the front porch, and prayer flags hung from the windows of the second floor. I was about to ring the doorbell when I noticed a girl who looked a few years older than me reading in a chair on the porch. Her hair was cropped very close, and she wore long feather earrings. "Excuse me, I'm looking for my sister, Sarah Addison. Do I have the right place?" I asked timidly. "Of course, you must be Charlotte, right? I'm Fern, come in." There was a group of people playing guitars in the living room and a few girls chatting on the enormous wooden staircase. Fern led me to the kitchen where my sister was reading a magazine at the table. She looked up and a big smile broke across her face. "Charlotte, you're here! I'm so glad you made it." I hadn't seen my sister since Christmas vacation, and she looked very different. She had lost a lot of weight. Her dark hair was much longer now, and she wore beaded bracelets and necklaces, denim overalls, and no shoes. She led me upstairs to a guest bedroom that overlooked much of the neighborhood. As I unpacked, I noticed a number of people coming and going all through the house. There must have been at least 10 people living in the house. Sarah told me they were mostly grad students living off campus and working summer jobs. After I was settled in, I helped Sarah and Fern make dinner. I was informed that my new roommates were vegetarian, so my sister taught me how to cook tofu, and we made salads with vegetables from the garden in the backyard. We all sat outside in the grass and ate as I was introduced to the other residents. That night, before I fell asleep, I looked out my bedroom window and just stared at all the little glowing lights of Eugene with a feeling of wonder and excitement in my belly. The first week of my stay was a whirlwind. Sarah and I floated the river one evening with her boyfriend Abe, who lived on campus. We rode our bikes downtown and spent the afternoon looking around thrift shops. I joined Sarah and Fern and a few other girls that lived in the house to hear a lecture at the EMU building on campus. We went to the Saturday market to have lunch, buy crafts, and listen to music. Eugene had quickly grown on me, and I began to fall in love with the wonderful people and the vibrant community it had to offer. The streets hummed with activity from early in the morning until late into the night. I quickly learned that nearly everyone here dressed in the fashion my sister and her friends had adopted. People were always streaming in and out of the Eugene Hotel and constantly coming and going at the bus station, each day bringing loads of young people to Eugene. At the end of the first week, my mother called me from Seattle to see how I'd been doing. She was full of questions about Sarah, her boyfriend, and the house that I was staying in. Oh, is the house nice? Is she keeping it clean, at least? Is she feeding you enough? I really hope she's not just feeding you junk all summer long. Is she going to church? How's the weather? Is it still chilly this time of year? You know, I can send you some more of your sweaters. I was sure you wouldn't pack enough coats. You know Jan from my book club. Well, she went down there to visit her niece last week, and apparently she lives on the very same street as your sister. The very same street. And she told me that it's just dropouts and dope peddlers living in that area. And I told her, my daughter is a good student, and she would never be into that hippy-dippy stuff. But it worries me. It really does. It worries me, Charlotte. I leaned against the window and looked out at the city. My mother was the conservative daughter of an immigrant family, and the only thing that scared her more than hippies was the thought of her daughter becoming one. Of course they wouldn't tell her that my sister had changed her major from business to women's studies. Of course they wouldn't tell her that Sarah was, at that very moment, attending a teach-in at the university. Of course they wouldn't tell her that tomorrow morning we'd all load up in Abe's truck and drive out to Elmira for a Renaissance fair to help Fern's friend sell some jewelry she'd made. Of course they wouldn't tell her that Ken Kesey, the acid-dropping merry prankster with the wildly painted bust, was rumored to be hanging out there. I hastily wrapped up the conversation with my mother and assured her that Sarah was fine and that she was taking good care of me. Downstairs, I helped pack food for the Renaissance fair. Fern's old roommate from boarding school, Luna, had invited us to spend the day out in Elmira on some kind of farm or something and help her sell her handmade jewelry. Apparently, it was way out in the country, and I could never recall going to Elmira, but Sarah assured me that we passed through there before on family trips to the beach. We awoke early the next day, and Abe drove us about a half hour out of the city, past the beautiful lake that was crowded with swimmers and boaters, to Elmira. It wasn't much of a town, but Veneta lay just beyond the woods where the fair was being held. Fern introduced us to Luna and her boyfriend Bear. They were both happy young people with slender and strong builds. Their skin was tan, and they appeared to have been on the road for a while. Luna was tall and had straight blonde hair and freckles. Bear wore a shaggy beard, cut-off denim shorts, and no shirt or shoes. They weren't the only ones modeling the look that had come to be the trademark of the hippie. All around, there were women with long braids, layers of beads, and hair and skin baked by the sun. There wasn't much but a field and acres of thick forest. A creek wound through the property. There were people selling all kinds of crafts from booths set up along a dirt trail through the woods. It was hot out. Thick brown dust rose from the dirt path and had settled on everything. Everyone was encouraged to come in costume. Fairgoers and vendors alike wore fairy wings, gems, glitter, tie-dye, and wild, flashy hats. Others wore nothing, or strategically placed body paint. Luna's booth area was under an enormous oak tree beside a young woman selling handmade clothes. We all spent the afternoon setting up tables and displays for the jewelry that she and Bear had made. Abe and Bear nailed together planks to reinforce the booth and make it sturdier, while Fern, Sarah, Luna, and I painted a big colorful sign to hang from a limb of the oak above the booth. When the work was done and the sun was setting, we wandered up the trail to a food booth and traded a pair of earrings for dinners for us all. We sat around eating in the newly constructed booth and got to know each other. Luna and Bear were from the Bay Area and had grown up in San Francisco. Adhering to the turn on, tune in, drop out message, they left the University of California, Berkeley, where Bear had been pursuing a business degree and Luna was studying art. They moved out of the dorms and into a van that they steered north up the coastline, staying with friends in Arcata for the summer. They spent a year at a remote commune near Redding, learning about meditation and how to grow their own food. They had followed some friends to Ken Kesey's home in La Honda, where they stayed briefly with old classmates and the Merry Pranksters. After that, they began making and selling jewelry at craft fairs and bazaars they came across during their travels throughout the Northwest. They had attended this fair last year when it was a benefit for an alternative school in Eugene. They met several like-minded people at the first fair when it was held in November a few years ago, and after it was over, they all seemed to congregate at the Odyssey Coffee House downtown, where they'd hang out and share ideas. Luna and Bear were impressed by the community and decided to stay a while, living in a co-op for several months. I had never met anyone who dared to do what they were doing. I was amazed and impressed, but also couldn't comprehend it. They had abandoned their homes and their education for an uncertain life on the road. Luna told us that in the San Francisco area, it was a time of serious unrest for the youth, especially on college campuses. When they had attended Berkeley, the campus had been rocked several times by student protests. There were be-ins, all kinds of demonstrations at Golden Gate Park, and countless student protests at the universities, mostly to show opposition to the war in Vietnam. My sister and her friends agreed, saying that this was the time when young people could be in power and change the world. The next day, the fair was in full swing. The morning was slow, but by noon, Sarah, Fern, and I were all manning the booth and helping customers, while Luna, Bear, and Abe helped out next door with some construction issues. I took care of the baby from the neighboring booth while his mother went to get some lunch. Later, my sister and I browsed the fair together, which was organized into 2 loops like a figure 8. We bought a couple beautiful handmade dresses and a cozy scarf for our mother, made by a couple from Portland. That evening, everyone from our section of the trail met up and joined around a big, warm bonfire underneath a full moon. We chatted about how our crafts had sold throughout the day and how smoothly the fair had been running this year. Someone brought along a banjo and someone else began playing their guitar. Before long, it was just a big circle of friends around a campfire, singing, telling stories, and getting to know each other.